How do we create the perfect cryptocurrency exchange? I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media. And today on the Crypto Coin Show, we have Adam Cai, CEO of Virgo Exchange. Adam, welcome back to the show. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you, Ashton, for having me. It was such a pleasure to come back again.
Likewise, great to have you here. I'm excited to dive into your insights into the centralized cryptocurrency exchanges. So much has happened in the last month or two with regards to crypto exchanges, and you being on the inside of an exchange, I feel like you have the insights into how do we properly manage a cryptocurrency exchange, what are the right things to do, what are the wrong things to do, and what went wrong with the FTX debacle, and how can we move past that and move forward towards mainstream crypto adoption. So thank you so much for taking the time. I would love to kick off our conversation with just starting with an overview of Virgo Exchange and what you and your team have built up, and then we'll dive into all the details.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ashton. So Virgo Group actually started since 2019. We're starting as a Canadian exchange. So a lot of users may know our brand Virgo CX. That's how we started. We started to run the exchange since 2019. So from day one, our vision has always been in trying to run a compliant, regulated exchanges. And even at the time that the regulation is not that clear, but we're still trying to get ourselves through that process and to be as compliant as possible. Even though the speed of that time is not that quick because of a lot of constraint. But I think, in the long run, this will be very beneficial, especially considering what happened to the industry. So we have been now registered as a restricted dealer and MSB in Canada, and we have been one of the, popular exchanges in Canada, and we have been, safely operating for more than 3 years now. Recently, Virgo Group has made its first international expansion to Australia. We have launched this year in October, and we have seen quite a bit of user growth in Australian side. And because of its fast payment network available in Australia, I do think that's also a pretty high potential markets. And we're certainly looking to go to more markets in the near future. But it's certainly a very exciting industry, and I think there's a lot of challenges. I'm happy to chat about it today with you, Ashton.
Very exciting and great to hear that you're expanding as well. Starting out in Canada, being a Canadian myself as well, there's not as many options for Canadian exchanges where you can onboard, CAD as opposed to American. I'm curious, in when you started and growing throughout these first 3 years, what are some of the things that you're attributing to the success and how quickly Virgo CX grew to get to this point?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I think, when we actually started the company, the industry was also in a very bearish market condition. So I remember the Bitcoin price at the time was slightly above $3,000, right? So there's a lot of questions about the sustainability of the industry and whether, there will be any success for the blockchain industry. So I think that the first thing is certainly, do you have a real passion for the blockchain industry, right? To kind of get through, different market conditions, trying to believe that it does have the future of it. So this actually need to have some internal drivers. So that's something I see our team has, even if there's a lot of questions outsider, but we don't care. We still think that we should do our best to contribute. So the second thing is really about trying to be able to execute. So a lot of times, in the blockchain industry, what we see is there are a lot of good ideas, but when it comes to the execution point, it becomes weak. And this is especially the case why a lot of people, fall out in a very short period of time, because, they cannot find a proper revenue models. They cannot find, constant incentives for the team to be motivated. And there are a lot of, challenges because of market price moves. So in order to have a sustainable business, we actually need to be able to execute well. So that's something I think we have been always doing. So I think last thing for the exchanges is also about internal controls. So exchange, to my eyes, it's not about how quick you can grow. Even though sometimes I do feel, kind of a little bit jealous and envied about other exchanges growing, in 1 year, they become millions of users very quickly. But if we think carefully, do they really have the internal control they have? Do they really have the infrastructure to handle millions of users? A lot of times the answer is no. However, people favor speed way more than quality. And that's why we do see some exchanges, not only about FTX, we have seen so many exchanges fall out in a short period of time. So I think, in order to be sustainable, we really need to have a medium to long-term view. And that's what I think keep us running smoothly in the past 3 years.
Very well said, Adam. And especially about the internal controls, and just making sure things are, running smoothly, because when you grow that quickly, sometimes it's hard to keep up. And I would love to get your insights on, the FTX insolvency. They seemed like they were following all the regulations and like getting, licenses or regulation in the States and elsewhere, and like everything seemed fine. But according to the internal controls and whatever was happening on the back end, it wasn't fine at all. And now there's millions of people that have lost money in the exchange. What do you think went wrong there? And then how can we prevent that?
Sure. I think this one, first of all, if we look at from the high level perspective, so there's actually a lack of understanding of what is a regulated cryptocurrency exchange. So there are, different levels. So the first level is what a lot of exchanges say, oh, we're regulated because we achieved the MSB license, and we achieved MTL license, MSB in US or MTL across different states. But if you actually analyze that closely, what does that really entails? Like these licenses are mainly for the anti-money laundering purpose, right? So it's mainly for the AML purpose. So that means the framework for those regulations is not necessarily going to analyze how tight your internal control are and how much measures you have put in to protect user assets. And this is actually not the purpose of those regulations, to be honest. So that's why when people use those things to say they're regulated, then the users are very easily deceived because they thought they're regulated, but they actually need not.
For sure.
And I think that's something the industry have to, get themselves well educated to a level that they understand what each license entails and what does that actually govern. And for example, in Canada, we have right now about 10 platforms that receive the security dealer license. So that process is actually very difficult. So the control supervision is up to the level of being like almost similar to a security broker, right? So in that way, certainly the control will be much higher. I cannot say it's 100% bulletproof, but still it's much better than, any kind of anti-money laundering purpose licensing. So that's the first thing. So people have to be very cautious about when any people tell you like we're regulated. Really ask them the question, like, what do you mean by regulation? And the second thing, go ahead, Ashton. Okay, so the second thing I also want to say is, FTX, the reason why this time they have such a big problem is obviously they have such a weak internal control, right? From the insider information, seems like, Sam himself, maybe with the connection with one or two people, they can move billions of dollars found out. And they can easily appropriate clients' fund to send to Alameda, and they can buy luxury condos house like in Bahamas. Like for that kind of things, to me, it's just they have a very weak control. Not only for they have a key man risks, such as one person can do so many things, but also they don't have an internal department that are able to supervise what key person does, and they don't have like a proper reconciliation process in place to say that whether the client's funds are indeed being safeguarded. So there are so many weaknesses in the internal control, and I think that's why FTX also had an issue. Is there's just not enough eyes on what's very important for exchanges.
Great points, Adam, and I am starting to understand that difference more and more when there's a regulated exchange, and sure, that means that the customers have to put their KYC information in, but does that mean that the founders of the exchange can hold all the funds and move it wherever they want? I feel like that's something totally different. And what we saw with Sam doing that, there was a notion over social media after with like all the exchanges saying, well, if we can provide proof of reserves, proof that our customers' funds are backed 1-to-1, then everything will be okay. Do you think that this proof of reserves of the customers' funds is the solution or part of the solution to solving this problem?
I think it only partially solves the problem. So proof of the reserve in most cases is a spot auditing. So it does actually tell you at this point of time, there are certain cryptocurrencies in those wallets, right? However, there are two key questions why I'm saying only partially solve this question. Because, for one is for a lot of offshore exchanges, you don't really know what's actually the customer numbers in their system, right? Because their system is not SOC compliant. They don't provide financial audit statements. So you don't know anything about it. So if they tell you, okay, I have $6 billion of crypto assets with us, but they only tell you, okay, they have a lot of money. They only tell you one part of the equation, right? They don't tell you the other part of the equation. So you don't know whether that's 100% or not, to be honest. That's the first thing. So the second thing is, it's really also about, how often do you do that auditing, right? If you only do once a while, it doesn't give you enough guarantee, this will always be the case. And even if some people, connecting with some real-time auditing software, you have to still ask the third question is, who controls those wallets? And whether those wallets are safe, right? Because even if you say, okay, I have all the money in those wallets, if it's FTX cases where one person can move all the money away, it doesn't matter whether you have proof of reserve or not. It's just not safe.
Yeah, definitely. Good point. And obviously having, the CEO of an exchange being able to move funds without permission of anybody else sounds like a red flag. What's the proper way an exchange should go about, having the authorization to move funds around?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question. It's all very technical. It always, depends on, each exchange's operational model. But I think, if you guys, look at, some of the guidelines from the security regulators in Canada, it does actually have some, kind of clarity provided to users in terms of how do we, at least Virgo CX guide clients funds, is we actually have to separate our assets. Majority of it, more than 80% of it will go to a qualified custodian right now. So we actually use Coinbase custody. And obviously in the future, we're looking to potentially become qualified custodian ourselves. But there are a lot of things we have to go through in order to have that status. And the remaining assets, obviously, you have to make sure that it's always multi-authorizations. I think in any period of time, you definitely need to have a few people, a few key management staff to be able to approve it. Never at no time you have one person to approve our transactions. And also in Canada, there's our specific rules about your hot wallet asset. This is something I actually wrote in my CEO letter, which is very different compared to the rest of the world. No other country have such rules, which is you need to have 100% of the cash reserve put into Canadian financial institutions to cover any hot wallet assets you custody. So this is really trying to say that, at the beginning, we're trying to say, okay, we're learning, we're trying to get ourselves better, but obviously we recognize the risks are there. So if anything happens, we still have the money to pay back users. At least it's not going to hamper users' asset. So I think in Canada, there are already a very strict framework to determine how you're going to custody clients' assets, what control level you should have, what insurance you should have. So I think this is a good foundation. Obviously, it would not be optimized yet, because it's not the most capital efficient way to do it. But I think over time, with this guideline, with the framework, I think we will find a really good balance point to ensure clients' assets are safe. And in the meantime, we also achieve some capital efficiency.
Wow, that's great to know, Adam. Thank you for that. And moving forward, did the FTX insolvency and all of the contagion that's happening affect in any way the way that Virgo Exchange is operating? Are you changing anything, or are you guys good to go?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, easy question for us, is simply no. Because the reason for that is initially when we choose a liquidity provider, actually I think that's what caused a lot of ecosystem players to lose money or even becoming bankrupted, is because they have so much money in FTX account to trade, to hedge. That's nothing wrong with that, to have hedging exposure over there. But the problem is when we start to do the third-party due diligence on FTX, what we realized is, first of all, to my point earlier, is they're not regulated at all. Like they only have like, anti-money laundering license, but that doesn't tell us anything about their internal control, right? So there's a red flag over there. So the second thing is obviously the fact that they're based offshore and all kind of that stuff also, give us not enough comfort, even though they have a much big brand. But to us, brand value only adds a little bit of points. It's not enough just to say you are big, right? So when we do the third-party due diligence, we didn't pass FTX Global, right? We were looking at FTX US at the time, but the fact that they don't actually even accept Canadian clients, so that kind of also get us away from that. Yeah. So all in all, like the reason why we're not exposed is because they simply didn't pass our third-party DD on day one.
That's great to hear, and I dodged a bullet there, Adam. Now, like one of the reasons why FTX was so popular and a lot of people liked using it was because they had a lot of products, and it was fast and, the functionality seemed good, but just the assets that people wanted to trade, and they were even moving into stocks and staking and things like that. Having good products, obviously, the more good products you have, the more people are going to want to use the exchange. I'm curious on where Virgo is standing in terms of bringing in more products that people want to use, and maybe you can just talk about what are the main products and what's the big focus coming up.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I think in the past, we have our main value proposition is acting as a fiat gateway to Canadian users and now to Australian users, trying to bridge the needs between the fiat assets and the crypto assets. So that's what we have been doing in the past 3 years. And what now we have been realizing is this is not enough. Because if we only do that way, the users have natural demands to withdraw the assets and to put into unregulated exchanges, trying to do a lot of other things to fulfill their trading needs. So in order to really try to internalize the users from a specific country, specific market, our product offering just have to be more diversified. And that's why we decided recently we launched an advanced trading tool called Gray Trading, which provides an automatic trading tool to allow people to buy low and sell high, and it gives them the chance to configure their own parameters to do a little bit automations on the trading features. And also we're certainly looking to add other services such as staking. So right now it's already in the final stage of getting approval and trying to get the product developed, tested well, and we're going to potentially launch that in the very near term. So we certainly trying to see, okay, what are some of the features we can kind of learn from the offshore exchanges. However, we want to make sure that those features we can put them in a properly regulated framework, right? We want to give people the safety in mind, so they don't need to worry about their assets are going to be lost overnight, right? Yeah. And in the meantime, we should also give what people want. I think that's something the industry, the regulated exchanges industry have to realize is if you don't do well, you don't get things done properly, people just have no choice but to take risks.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I would love to have a function to automatically buy low and sell high. So I'm looking forward to checking that out. And are you optimistic about centralized exchanges and potentially including more DeFi functionality and moving into 2023? Because I've heard from others that obviously people that leave too much on exchanges, or they're relying on centralized parties, and there's that trust factor and something goes wrong. A lot of people are moving towards DeFi or self-custody. Are you optimistic about centralized exchanges continuing to grow as we move forward?
Yeah, from my personal perspective, centralized exchanges in the future will still be, existing. So the reason for that is, there needs to be always a gateway for people to, exchange crypto to fiat assets, right? Whenever they need. And when it comes to DeFi, because of the fact that the KYC is not up to level, and I don't think that DeFi will fulfill the needs for the bridge between the fiat assets and crypto assets at all. So I think, because of that reason, the centralized exchange will always exist to play a role. However, what I think will really have a diminishing hope actually for the central exchanges are actually indeed those offshore exchanges, where in the past they have been very loose on KYC AML have been really loose on the internal control side. After collapse of FTX, people now are going to have a very simple question: if FTX can collapse, what can assure you not to be a collapse, right? So I think that question will remain unanswered for a lot of unregulated exchanges in the near term or the middle term. So I think in the future, central exchanges is going to be heavily regulated. And I would even not categorize it to be a technology company anymore. I would categorize it as a financial service company. So only with that, we can gain the trust again back from the users.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's very hard if you have fiat currency or Canadian dollars. How do you get that into DeFi without the centralized exchange and without doing something sketchy? Obviously you want to trust the financial institutions to be that onboarding for you. So from what I understand, Virgo is one of the best places to start if you're starting with Canadian dollars to get into crypto. And now you've mentioned that you've also expanded out to Australia, which is super cool as well. Besides those places, what are the sort of the next stages of growth, for international expansion?
Yeah, so for our approach, we take a little bit different approach than a lot of people just going directly to US, because we think the US market right now are very competitive, right? So we're trying to service those countries that are less competitive, but also share a similar cultural background in Canada. And also, they have a very robust payment capabilities on the fiat side. So that's why we choose Australia. They have a 724 real-time payment. That's why we're also looking at the UK. They have that fast payment as well. And they have also clear regulatory framework to regulate exchanges. So we're certainly looking to get those three countries trying to be well established in the next year or so. And then we may look at some Asian countries as well. We have a strong Asian background. We're looking at Hong Kong. So Hong Kong recently announced some big announcement. They're trying to gain back the market shares of becoming the hub of Asia for blockchain.
Wow.
It used to be heavily influenced by China, but now they kind of have their own, kind of opinion on that. So that's good to hear. And also we're looking at Singapore as well. There are quite a bit of market shares over there. So all in all, I think there are still so many growth opportunities out there, and we still think like it's still early, right? From the Bank of Canada research paper, right now I believe, if I don't remember wrong, we only got 13% or 14% of people who got cryptos, right? And previously in 2017, it's only 5%. So I would say there's so much room to grow.
Definitely. Wow, that's great to hear. And even then, it's already doubled. So I can imagine it will probably grow even quicker. And that's exciting to hear about the Asian markets as well. But for right now, what is the best way for people, Canadian, Australian, UK people looking into this to learn more and to get started with Virgo?
Sure. Yeah. So after all these, 3 years building, like right now, we do have a very, seamless experience for the users. You can register account, and most of times, which is quite instantaneous if your, KYC doesn't have any issues. And our funding channel on both Canadian side and Australian side have been, nearly instant as well. So it's actually right now the barrier of using our exchanges has been significantly lower. And you have a lot of automation already out there to have a very smooth experiences. So all you need to do is just go to Virgo website, trying to check out. We do have quite a few blog sections to tell you how to use exchanges, some kind of basic knowledge about blockchain industries, and some of the very important features to look for if you're concerned about the securities. And we're certainly very happy to answer any kind of questions you have, to custody funds with us. So all this information are public available online, and we are always very happy to answer any questions if you have further, just to our support emails. And we occasionally organize information sessions such as with you, Ashton, and other people, just trying to voice a bit more about our opinion. And I think in the future we will do something more to educate the markets, and we're very happy to share all the information the market needs.
Sounds great, Adam. Thank you so much. I will leave the link to the Virgo platform and the social links as well in the description box below. I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for the insights into how to properly run a cryptocurrency exchange. and all the best with Virgo moving forward. And let's follow up in the near future.
Thank you, Ashton. Appreciate your time.